Velik stood before the Academy of Xenological Studies and prepared to destroy a legend. The great hall was nearly empty. Only 14 scholars had come to hear his presentation, and most of them looked bored. This was not surprising. Velik's thesis was dry, academic, and deeply unpopular. He was arguing that humans had never existed. "The evidence is clear," Velik said, his mandibles clicking as he spoke. His species, the Torvine, were insectoid beings with 4 arms and compound eyes that saw in spectrums other species could not imagine. They were known throughout the galactic concord for their love of facts and their hatred of mysteries. Every supposed record of human existence can be traced to corrupted data, mistranslation, or deliberate fabrication. He gestured with his upper arms, and the holographic display behind him changed. It showed a map of the galaxy with a dark region marked in red. "The shroud," he continued, "is simply a natural phenomenon, a region of gravitationally distorted space that interferes with our sensors. There is nothing sinister about it. There are no ancient warnings. There are no humans hiding within." One of the scholars raised a tentacle. She was a Melvari, an aquatic species that moved through the air in specially designed hover tanks. "What about the buoys?" she asked. "The warning markers around the shroud? Old navigation aids?" Velik said dismissively. "Their original purpose has been lost to time. Later generations invented stories to explain them. This is how myths are born. We see something we do not understand, and we create monsters to fill the gap in our knowledge." He clicked his mandibles in what passed for a smile among his people. "Humans are the galaxy's favorite monster. They are blamed for everything. The shroud, the great silence of the Third Era, the disappearance of the Kellen species, all attributed to humans. All without evidence." The display changed again, showing various artistic representations of humans from different species. They varied wildly. Some showed towering giants with burning eyes. Others depicted small, fragile creatures with too many fingers. A few portrayed them as shapeless shadows that consumed light itself. "Look at these images," Velik said. "They cannot even agree on what humans looked like. Because no one has ever seen one. Because they do not exist. They never did." He was about to continue when every screen in the building flickered. The holographic display behind him dissolved into static. Then a face appeared, and Velik's confidence shattered like glass. The face belonged to a Concord official, and she looked terrified. "Emergency broadcast to all citizens," she said, her voice shaking. "The hegemony of Crix has attacked the Talvin refugee fleet. There are no survivors. 800,000 civilians are dead. The Concord Security Council is meeting in emergency session." The broadcast ended. The scholars in the hall sat in stunned silence. Velik lowered his upper arm slowly. He had heard about the Talvin situation, of course. Everyone had. The Crix had been conquering their border worlds for months, and the Talvin people had been fleeing in any ship they could find. But this was different. This was not conquest. This was slaughter. "The presentation is concluded," Velik said quietly. No one argued. He gathered his materials and left the hall, his mind already racing. The Crix had been growing bolder for decades. They were a warrior species, cold-blooded reptilians, who believed that strength was the only virtue. They had been expanding their territory steadily, swallowing smaller species and crushing any resistance. The Concord had done nothing. They had issued statements, imposed sanctions, and held meetings. But they had never actually stopped the Crix. They were too afraid. The Crix military was vast and brutal, and no one wanted to be the next target of their aggression. Velik walked through the capital city of the Concord, barely seeing the towering buildings and bustling crowds around him. He was thinking about his presentation, about humans, about monsters. The stories said that humans had been the most dangerous species ever to exist. They said that humans had waged wars that burned entire worlds. They said that humans had developed weapons that could crack planets and tear holes in the fabric of space itself. They said that humans had nearly destroyed the galaxy before they had disappeared. Velik had spent his entire career proving that these stories were nonsense. He had traced the origins of the myths, cataloged the contradictions, analyzed the corrupted records. He had built an airtight case. But now, watching the news feeds fill with images of burning ships and floating bodies, he found himself wondering, if humans had been real, would they have stopped the Kricks? Would they have done something? It was a foolish thought. Velik dismissed it and continued walking. 3 days later, everything changed. Velik was in his office at the academy when the alert started. His personal display lit up with emergency notifications. Ships were disappearing along the border of the shroud. Not destroyed, just gone. Crick's scout vessels had entered the region and never returned. Then came the gravitational readings. Something massive was moving inside the shroud. Something that defied physics. The sensors showed an object traveling faster than light while simultaneously registering as perfectly still. It was impossible. It was nonsense. Then the object emerged. Velik watched the live feed from a Concorde observation post near the shroud. The image showed empty space, stars burning cold and distant. Then there was a flash of light, and the stars disappeared. Not disappeared, were blocked. Something had appeared between the observation post and the stars. Something vast. The cameras adjusted, trying to capture the shape of the thing. Velik stared at his screen, his compound eyes unable to process what he was seeing. It was a ship. It had to be a ship, but it was nearly the size of a small moon. Its hull was dark, almost black, covered in strange patterns that seemed to shift and move when he looked at them directly. Parts of it looked grown rather than built, like the skeleton of some impossible creature wrapped in metal and light. It was ancient. Velik could feel its age somehow, could sense the weight of millennia pressing down on it. But it was also alive with power. Energy crackled along its surface in waves. Lights pulsed in patterns that hurt to watch. The observation post tried to hail the vessel. There was no response. Then every screen in the galaxy lit up at once. Velik saw the face, and his world ended. It was a human. She was smaller than the myth suggested. Soft-skinned, with dark hair and eyes that reflected light in a way that seemed almost artificial. She wore a simple uniform, dark with silver trim. Behind her, the interior of the ship stretched away into shadow. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Remembrance," she said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "We received a distress signal from this region of space. We have come to help." She paused, and her eyes seemed to look directly at Velik through the screen. "Please identify the nature of your emergency." The galaxy held its breath. Velik felt his legs give way beneath him, and he sat heavily on the floor of his office. His carefully constructed thesis lay scattered around him, useless now. Everything he had believed, everything he had taught, everything he had proven was wrong. Humans were real. Humans had returned, and they had come to help. The implications crashed over him like waves. If humans were real, then what else was true? The weapons that broke physics, the wars that burned worlds, the terrible ancient power that had nearly destroyed everything. On the screen, Captain Chen was still waiting for an answer. Her expression was patient, curious, almost kind. She did not look like a monster. She did not look like a legend. She looked like someone who had heard a cry for help and had come running. Velik thought about the Talvin refugees, 800,000 souls burned to nothing by Crick's weapons. He thought about the decades of conquest and cruelty that the Concorde had been too afraid to stop. He thought about all the species that had suffered and died while the great powers of the galaxy issued statements and held meetings. And he thought about the human woman on the screen, asking what she could do to help. Across the galaxy, the Crick's military was mobilizing. Their commanders were laughing at the strange ship, calling it a Concorde trick, dismissing the human as an actor in a costume. They had never believed in myths. They believed only in power. They were about to learn the truth. In his office, surrounded by the ruins of his academic career, Velik watched the screens and waited for the galaxy to change forever. The age of myths was ending. The age of humans had begun. And somewhere deep in the shroud, the remembrance hummed with power that had slept for 12,000 years. Its captain stood on the bridge, looking at the stars she had not seen in so long, and smiled. It was good to be home. Supreme Commander Veraxis, watched the footage of the human ship for the 100th time, and laughed. His scales were a deep crimson. Marking him as royalty among the Cricks, he sat in his command throne aboard the dreadnought Conquest of Worlds, surrounded by his most trusted officers. They were orbiting above their newest prize, a planet that had once belonged to a species called the Melnori. The Melnori were gone now. Veraxis had made sure of that. "This is what the Concord sends against us," he said, gesturing at the image on his screen. "One ship and a female in costume. They must be truly desperate." His second in command, a younger Crix named Threll, leaned forward. "The ship is massive, Supreme Commander. Our scouts report that it is nearly moon-sized. The energy readings are beyond anything in our records." Trix, Veraxis said dismissively. "Sensor manipulation. The Concord has always been clever with technology. It is why they have survived so long despite their weakness." He stood from his throne and walked to the viewing window. Outside, the conquered planet turned slowly, its cities still burning from the invasion. Smoke rose from 100 locations, visible even from orbit. "Send a message to Fleet Command," Veraxis ordered. "I want every available warship moved to intercept this supposed human vessel. We will destroy their trick and then broadcast its wreckage to every corner of the galaxy. The Concord will learn that nothing can stand against the hegemony." Threll hesitated. "Supreme Commander, the old texts warn against engaging humans. The priests say the priests are fools who worship ancient stories," Veraxis interrupted. "Humans do not exist. They never did. This is a Concord deception, and we will expose it for what it is." He turned back to the screen, where the image of Captain Sarah Chen was frozen mid-sentence. Such a small, fragile-looking thing. Veraxis had crushed entire species that looked more threatening. "Prepare my fleet," he said. "We move within the hour." Far across the galaxy, the Concord was in chaos. The emergency summit had been going for 2 days without rest. Representatives from 400 species crowded into the Great Hall, their voices rising in fear and confusion. Some demanded that the Concord contact the humans immediately. Others wanted to flee. A few suggested joining the Crix rather than facing whatever was coming. Velik sat in the observer's gallery, watching the chaos below. He had been summoned to the capital by Concord intelligence. They wanted his expertise on humans. The irony was not lost on him. "You are the foremost scholar on human mythology," the intelligence director had told him. "We need you to help us understand what we are dealing with." "I spent my career proving humans were not real," Velik had replied. "Yes, and you were wrong. Now help us survive your mistake." So here he was, watching the galaxy's leaders panic, while the largest ship ever recorded drifted slowly toward Crix's space. The Remembrance had not attempted to communicate again after its initial message. It simply moved, steady and inevitable. Toward the heart of the hegemony, the representative from the Melvari floated to the central platform in her hover tank. "We have analyzed all available data on the human vessel," she announced. "Our findings are troubling." The hall grew quiet. "The ship appears to be approximately 12,000 years old," she continued. "Its hull composition does not match any known material. Its energy signature suggests power generation capabilities that exceed our entire civilization's output combined. We cannot determine how it travels faster than light because our physics says it should not be possible, so it is a weapon," someone called out. "They have come to finish what they started thousands of years ago." "We do not believe so," the Melvari said. "The ship has made no aggressive moves. It has not raised shields or charged weapons. It responded to a distress signal." Captain Chen asked how she could help. "A trick," another representative shouted. "They want us to lower our guard, perhaps. Or perhaps the stories are incomplete. We know humans were dangerous, but we also have records suggesting they changed, that they chose exile rather than continue their wars. If those records are accurate, then the humans who have returned may be very different from the humans who nearly destroyed the galaxy." Velik found himself nodding. He had dismissed those records during his research. They did not fit the narrative of humans as monsters. But if the monsters were real, then perhaps the stories of redemption were real too. His thoughts were interrupted by another emergency alert. The screens throughout the hall flickered, and a new image appeared. It was a Krix military broadcast, transmitted openly on all frequencies. Supreme Commander Vraxis stood before his fleet. Behind him, thousands of warships filled the void, their weapons charged and ready. Tension, concord, liars, and human pretenders, he said. This is the hegemony of Krix. We do not believe in your myths. We do not fear your tricks. Your single ship faces 200,000 of our finest warships. Surrender now, and we may show mercy. Resist, and we will add your wreckage to our collection. He smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. You have 1 hour. The broadcast ended. The Concord Hall erupted in panic again. Vel left the hall and found a quiet observation deck. Through the windows, he could see the stars burning, cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the Remembrance was approaching the largest military fleet ever assembled. One ship against 200,000, he should have felt fear. He should have felt horror at the coming slaughter. Instead, he felt something strange. Something like hope, because the human ship had not stopped. It had not turned away. It was still moving toward the Krix fleet, steady and inevitable. As if 200,000 warships were nothing more than an inconvenience. The hour passed. The galaxy watched. The Krix fleet formed a sphere around the predicted arrival point of the human vessel. Every weapon was charged. Every targeting system was locked. Supreme Commander Vraxis stood on his bridge, his claws gripping his throne, ready to give the order to fire. The Remembrance dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in the center of the Krix formation. For a moment, nothing happened. The human ship hung there, impossibly still, surrounded by enemies. Then every screen and every Krix ship activated simultaneously. Captain Sarah Chen appeared. She looked exactly as she had in her first broadcast, calm and patient and strangely kind. I see you received my message. I am here to help with the emergency. Could you please direct me to the species or individuals who require assistance? Vraxis stared at the screen. Then he began to laugh. Fire, he ordered. Fire everything. 200,000 ships opened fire at once. The void lit up with enough energy to burn a planet to ash. Missiles streaked toward the Remembrance from every direction. Energy beams converged on its hull from thousands of angles. The combined firepower of the Krix military, the most powerful force in the known galaxy, struck the human vessel with everything it had. The Remembrance did not raise shields. The weapons simply stopped. Missiles froze in space. Their engines still burning, but their momentum gone. Energy beams curved away at impossible angles, dissipating into nothing. Nuclear warheads hung motionless, their countdown timers frozen at 0. Vraxis watched his display with growing horror. Not a single weapon had touched the human ship. Not a single beam had even come close. It was as if the Remembrance existed in a bubble, where the laws of physics no longer applied, Captain. Chen was still on the screen. Her expression had not changed. I see, she said. I will interpret that as a greeting. Cultural differences can be challenging. Now, please, who needs help? I detected a distress signal originating from this region of space. There were civilians in danger. I would like to assist them. Vraxis found his voice. What are you? He whispered. I am human, Chen said. We received a call for help. Came. This is what we do. She tilted her head slightly, and something shifted in her eyes. Something old and sad and impossibly tired. Supreme Commander Vraxis, I have been watching your civilization for a very long time. I have seen what you do to the weak. I have seen the burning cities and the refugee fleets and the mass graves. I know about the Talvan. I know about the Melnori. I know about all of them. Her voice remained calm, but Velik, watching from the Concord capital, felt something cold run through him. This was not anger. This was something worse. This was disappointment. I did not come here to fight you, Chen continued. I came here to help your victims. But if you insist on being an obstacle to that help, I will remove you. Not because I want to. Not because it will bring me joy. But because I made a promise 12,000 years ago that I would never again stand by while innocents suffered. You have one standard day to withdraw from all conquered territories and release all prisoners. After that, I will help them myself, and you will not enjoy the experience." The screen went dark. Vraxis sat in silence. Around him, his officers were checking their weapons, running diagnostics, searching for explanations. None of them understood what had just happened. None of them could explain how their weapons had failed. But Vraxis understood. He had seen the look in the human's eyes. He had heard the weight of millennia in her voice. The myths were real, and the monster was not what he had expected. The monster was patient and sad and disappointed in what it had found. For the first time in his long career of conquest, Supreme Commander Vraxis felt something he had never experienced before. He felt afraid. Vela had never been so afraid in his life. The shuttle carrying him toward the Remembrance was tiny compared to the human vessel. As they approached, the ship grew larger and larger until it filled every window, until it seemed to swallow the stars themselves. Its hull was dark and strange, covered in patterns that seemed to move when Velik looked at them directly. "We are being scanned," the pilot said, her voice shaking. "Energy signatures I have never seen before. They know everything about us." Velik clicked his mandibles nervously. "Just maintain course. They invited us. They would not destroy us after inviting us." "No," Velik admitted, "but I choose to believe it." The shuttle entered a hangar bay that could have held a small city. Lights guided them to a landing pad where 3 figures waited. 2 were obviously machines, tall and sleek and glowing with soft blue light. The third was human. Captain Sarah Chen looked smaller in person. She was shorter than Velik, with dark hair streaked with gray and eyes that seemed to hold impossible depth. She wore the same simple uniform from the broadcasts, dark with silver trim. "Scholar Velik," she said as he descended from the shuttle. "Welcome aboard the Remembrance. I have read your work on human mythology. It was quite thorough." Velik's mandibles clicked in embarrassment. "I was wrong about everything." "Not everything," Chen said. "You were correct that many of the stories were exaggerated or corrupted. Humans were never giants with burning eyes. We never consumed light or breathed fire. We were always just people. Fragile, mortal, confused people who made terrible mistakes." She gestured for him to follow. "Come, I will show you the truth, and then you can share it with your Concord. Perhaps it will help them understand why we are here." They walked through corridors that hummed with quiet power. The walls seemed alive somehow, pulsing with soft light that followed their movement. Velik saw chambers filled with strange machinery, gardens where impossible plants grew in artificial sunlight, and windows that looked out on the stars. "The Remembrance is not just a ship," Chen explained. "It is a memorial. A reminder, we built it after our last war, when we finally understood what we had become." "What did you become?" Velik asked. Chen stopped walking. They were standing before a massive door, 10 times their height, carved with symbols that hurt to look at. "We had become monsters," she said simply. "The stories your species tell about us are pale shadows of the truth. We developed weapons that could tear holes in reality. We fought wars that lasted centuries. We burned worlds not for resources or territory, but simply because we could. Because we were angry. Because we were afraid. Because we had forgotten how to be anything else." The door opened and Velik saw what lay beyond. It was a wall of names. An endless wall stretching up and up until it vanished into darkness. Names in 1,000 different scripts, scrolling slowly, constantly, never ending. "These are the people we killed," Chen said. "Not enemies. Not soldiers. Civilians. Innocents. Children. We counted them all. We recorded every name we could find. It took us 300 years. Velik stared at the wall. The names kept scrolling. There were millions of them. Billions. More than he could comprehend. "Why?" he whispered. "Why did you do this?" "Because we needed to remember," Chen said. "Because we needed to understand the weight of what we had done. Every human who has ever served aboard this ship has stood where you are standing now. Every one of us has read the names. It takes years. We make the time. She turned to face him, and her eyes were old. So impossibly old. We nearly destroyed the galaxy, Scholar Velik. Not by accident. Not through carelessness. Through choice. Through rage. Through the belief that our power gave us the right to do whatever we wanted. When we finally stopped, when we finally looked at what we had become, we were horrified. So you left, Velik said. The shroud. The exile. It was your choice. Yes. We built the shroud to contain ourselves. We knew that if we stayed, if we tried to rebuild, we would fall back into the same patterns. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we had absolute power. She led him away from the wall of names, through another corridor, into a chamber filled with soft light. Holographic displays showed images of worlds recovering, species rebuilding, civilizations emerging from the ashes of the wars humanity had caused. We spent 12,000 years watching, Chen said. Waiting, healing. We developed our technology further, not to build better weapons, but to build better tools, better medicine, better ways to help instead of harm. And we waited for the day when someone would need us. The distress signal, Velik said. From the Talvin refugees? Yes, we heard their cry. 800,000 people fleeing for their lives, begging for help that never came. And we could not ignore it. Not anymore, but why now? Why, after so long? Chen smiled, and there was pain in it. Because we are ready. Because we have changed. Because the question is no longer whether we can destroy our enemies. The question is whether we should. And the answer is always the same now. No, never again. Not unless there is no other choice. She touched a control and the displays changed. They showed the Krix fleet, still surrounding the Remembrance, still trying to find weapons that would work. The Krix believe that strength is the only virtue, Chen said. They believe that power gives them the right to take whatever they want. They are what we used to be. And that is why I understand them. And that is why I must stop them. Will you destroy them? Velik asked. No. Chun's voice was firm. We will never add to the wall of names again. Not even enemy names. We will stop the Krix, but we will not become them. By showing them another way. By demonstrating that true strength is not the ability to destroy, but the choice not to. They will not believe it at first. No one ever does. But they will learn. Velik thought about the wall of names. About the billions of dead. About the 12,000 years of exile and penance and waiting. The Concord fears you, he said. They think you have come to finish what you started. That is why I ask for you. You understand myths, Scholar Velik. You know how stories change over time, how fear distorts truth. I need you to tell them the real story. Not the myth of human monsters. The truth of human monsters who chose to become something else. She touched another control, and a new image appeared. It showed the galaxy, with the shroud marked in red and the Krix territory marked in orange. The Krix have conquered 47 species in the last 100 years. They have killed billions. They have enslaved billions more. The Concord has done nothing because they are afraid. The Krix are powerful, Velik said. The Krix are nothing. Chin's voice was flat. Their entire civilization, their entire military, everything they have built could not scratch the paint on this ship. I could end them in an afternoon. I could make their stars go dark and their worlds fall silent. I have that power. Every human on this ship has that power. She looked at Velik, and her eyes burned with something ancient and terrible. But we will not use it. Not because we cannot. Because we choose not to. Because we remember what we were, and we will never be that again. The Krix will be stopped, but they will be stopped through mercy. Through patience. Through the simple, stubborn belief that even the worst among us can change, if given the chance. And if they do not change? Velik asked. If they refuse your mercy, then we will wait. We are very good at waiting. 12,000 years taught us patience. And eventually, one way or another, they will learn. Everyone learns eventually. The door to the chamber opened, and one of the machine beings entered. Captain, the deadline approaches. The Cricks have not withdrawn. Chen nodded slowly. Thank you. Prepare for engagement. She turned back to Velik. Go back to the Concord Scholar. Tell them what you have learned. Tell them that humans have returned and we have come to help. Tell them not to be afraid. What are you going to do? Chen smiled. It was a sad smile, ancient and tired and full of determination. I am going to teach the Cricks what true strength looks like, and I am going to do it without killing a single one of them. She walked away, toward the bridge of the remembrance, toward a confrontation that would reshape the galaxy. Velik watched her go, this small, fragile-looking human who carried the weight of billions of deaths on her shoulders and had somehow found the strength to become something better. He had spent his career studying myths. Now he understood that the greatest myth of all was not the story of human monsters. It was the story of human redemption. And it was about to become reality. The Battle of Crix Prime was not really a battle. It was a lesson. Supreme Commander Vraxis had spent the entire day preparing his fleet. 200,000 warships had been repositioned into attack formations. New weapons had been brought online. Scientists had worked without rest to understand why their first attack had failed. They had found nothing. Their weapons were working perfectly. The missiles flew true. The energy beams fired with full power. Everything was functioning exactly as designed. The human ship simply did not care. All ships opened fire, Varaxis ordered. His voice was steady, but his claws were shaking. Everything we have, do not stop until that vessel is dust. The void lit up again. 200,000 ships unleashed their full fury on the Remembrance. The combined firepower could have cracked a planet. It should have reduced any vessel to atoms. The Remembrance began to move. It was not fast. It did not need to be. The ship simply drifted forward through the storm of weapons, and nothing touched it. Missiles curved away at the last moment, as if repelled by an invisible force. Energy beams bent around the hull like water flowing around a stone. Nuclear warheads detonated early, their explosions blooming harmlessly in the void. What is happening? Vraxis demanded. Why can we not hit them? Unknown, Supreme Commander, his weapons officer said. Our targeting systems show direct hits, but the weapons just stop. The Remembrance reached the first Crix warship. It was a destroyer, small by Crix standards, but still crude by 500 warriors. They fired their weapons at point-blank range. The human ship touched them. Just touched them. Hull against hull. Gentle as a whisper. Every system on the destroyer shut down at once. Weapons went cold. Engines stopped. Lights flickered and died. The only things still working were life support and communications. Crix vessel, Captain Chen's voice came through the emergency channels. Your weapons have been disabled. Please remain calm. Life support is functioning. Rescue teams will arrive shortly. The Remembrance moved on to the next ship. Verxis watched in horror as the human vessel drifted through his fleet like a ghost. Every ship it touched went dark. Every warrior it encountered was left alive but helpless. It did not fire a single weapon. It did not destroy a single vessel. It simply turned off his entire military, one ship at a time. All ships, retreat, he ordered. Fall back to defensive positions around Crix Prime. But it was too late. The Remembrance was everywhere now. It seemed to move in ways that physics should not allow, appearing beside ships that had been kilometers away moments before. Within an hour, half the fleet was disabled. Within 2 hours, 3/4. Within 3 hours, only the flagship remained. Vraxis sat alone on his bridge. His officers had fled to the escape pods, but he refused to leave. He was Supreme Commander of the Crix hegemony. He would face this enemy himself. The Remembrance appeared directly in front of his viewport. Its hull filled his entire field of vision, dark and ancient and impossibly patient. His weapons tried to fire. They did not respond. His engines tried to engage. They remained silent. His shields tried to raise. Nothing happened. The airlock opened. Captain Sarah Chen walked onto his bridge. She was alone. No weapons, no guards. just a small human woman in a simple uniform. Walking calmly into the heart of the most powerful military vessel in the Krik's fleet, Vraxis rose from his throne. He was 3 times her height, covered in armored scales, with claws that could tear through metal. He had killed hundreds of enemies with his bare hands. "You should be afraid," he said. "I am not," Chen replied. "I have nothing to fear from you. If I could kill you where you stand, you could try." She did not seem worried. "But you will not, because you are beginning to understand." Vraxis felt his rage building. This creature, this tiny, soft-skinned thing, had humiliated him, had destroyed his fleet without firing a shot, had made a mockery of everything he believed. "What do you want?" he demanded. "I want you to stop." "Stop what?" "All of it. The conquests. The killing, the enslavement. The belief that power gives you the right to take whatever you want from whoever is too weak to stop you." Vraxis laughed bitterly. "This is your great wisdom? Your ancient human philosophy? You want us to simply stop being what we are? I want you to choose what you become." Chen stepped closer, and her eyes held no fear, only sadness. "I know what you are. I know the hunger that drives you, the belief that strength is the only thing that matters. The fear that if you ever show weakness, you will be destroyed. I know because I used to feel the same way." She gestured at the disabled fleet around them, thousands of ships floating dark and silent in the void. "Look at what I could do to you. Look at what I chose not to do. Every one of your warriors is alive. Every one of your ships is intact. I could have killed them all. I could have burned Krik's Prime to ashes and scattered your species across the galaxy. I have that power. Do you understand? I have the power to destroy you utterly, and I chose mercy instead." "Weakness," Vraxis spat. "No, strength." Chen's voice was firm. "Any coward can destroy. It takes no courage to kill someone weaker than yourself. True strength is having the power to destroy and choosing not to use it. True strength is looking at your enemy and seeing something worth saving instead of something to be crushed." He reached out and touched his arm. Her hand was so small against his scales, so fragile. "I know what we did to the galaxy," she said quietly. 12,000 years ago, humans were worse than you could ever dream of being. We killed billions. We burned worlds. We nearly ended everything. And when we finally stopped, we had a choice. We could have ruled the ashes. We could have become tyrants over whatever was left. Instead, we chose exile. We chose penance. We chose to become something better. Why? The word escaped Vraxis before he could stop it, because we saw what we had become. Because we looked at the dead and the dying, and we finally understood that power without compassion is just cruelty. And we decided that we would rather disappear forever than be cruel. She released his arm and stepped back. "The Kriks have a choice now. You can continue as you are. You can keep conquering and killing and believing that this makes you strong. Or you can choose something else. You can look at your victims and see beings worthy of respect instead of resources to be exploited. You can become protectors instead of predators. And if we refuse, then we will wait. We will protect the weak from you. We will heal the damage you cause, and we will wait for you to change. It may take 100 years, it may take 1,000, but eventually, you will see what we saw. You will understand what we understood, and you will make the same choice we made." She turned to leave, then stopped at the airlock. "We are sending aid to your disabled ships. Medical teams, engineers, supplies. Your warriors will be treated with dignity and care. When they are ready, they will be returned to you. Think about why we did that. Think about what it means." She looked back at him one final time. "The choice is yours, Supreme Commander. What do you want the Kriks to become?" Then she was gone, and Vraxis was alone on his dark bridge, surrounded by the ruins of his fleet, thinking about choices. Outside, the Remembrance began its work. Shuttles launched from its hangars, carrying human medical teams and engineers. They boarded disabled Kriks ships and began helping the warriors inside. They treated wounds. They repaired life support systems. They offered food and water to enemies who had tried to kill them hours before. The Kriks did not understand. They expected execution, or torture, or enslavement. That was what they would have done. That was what strength meant. Instead, they received kindness. They received help. They received something they had no word for. They received mercy, and slowly, one warrior at a time, they began to understand. The supreme commander of the Krik's hegemony sat alone in the darkness of his flagship. He thought about the human woman who had walked onto his bridge without fear. He thought about the power she controlled and the choice she had made. He thought about the wall of names she had described, billions of dead remembered forever. He thought about the species he had conquered, the worlds he had burned, the civilians he had killed. He had never counted them. He had never thought they were worth counting. Now he wondered if perhaps he had been wrong. Outside his viewport, human shuttles moved through the debris field, saving the lives of warriors who had tried to destroy them. It made no sense. It was weakness. It was foolishness. It was everything Vraxis had been taught to despise. And yet, for the first time in his long career of conquest, Supreme Commander Vraxis felt something other than hunger or rage or contempt. He felt shame. And somewhere in that shame, something new began to grow. Something that might, in time, become something better. The humans had not come to destroy the Kriks. They had come to save them. From themselves? 6 months after the Battle of Krik's Prime, the galaxy was not the same. Velik stood before the Academy of Xenological Studies once again. But this time, the Great Hall was packed. Representatives from hundreds of species had come to hear him speak. Cameras broadcast his words to every corner of known space. The scholar who had once tried to prove humans were myths was now the foremost expert on human reality. "Let me tell you what I learned," he said, his mandibles clicking as he addressed the crowd. "Let me tell you the truth about humanity," he gestured, and the holographic display behind him came to life. It showed the remembrance, vast and ancient, drifting among the stars. The myths got it wrong. Humans were not giants with burning eyes. They were not demons or gods or forces of nature. They were people. Small, fragile, mortal people who made terrible mistakes. The display changed, showing the wall of names inside the remembrance. The endless scroll of the dead. 12,000 years ago, humans nearly destroyed the galaxy. They developed weapons that broke physics. They fought wars that lasted centuries. They killed billions of innocent people from dozens of species. This is true. The myths understated it, if anything. A murmur ran through the crowd. Velik let them process this before continuing. But here's what the myths missed. When humans finally stopped fighting, they did not celebrate their victory. They did not claim the galaxy as their prize. They looked at what they had done, and they were horrified. They counted every death. They recorded every name. They built a memorial so vast that it takes years to read. The display changed again, showing Captain Chen on the bridge of the remembrance. And then they left. They built the shroud to contain themselves. They chose exile because they knew that if they stayed, they might fall back into the same patterns. For 12,000 years, they watched us from the darkness. They developed technology beyond our imagination, not to build better weapons, but to build better ways to help. And they waited. Waited for what? Someone called out, "At!" For us to need them. For someone to cry for help? Velik paused. When the Talvan refugees were destroyed, their distress signal reached the shroud. The humans heard it, and they came. The display showed the Battle of Krik's Prime, 200,000 warships against one. The impossible sight of the remembrance drifting through the enemy fleet, touching ship after ship, shutting down weapons without firing a single shot. They could have destroyed the Kriks. Captain Chen told me this herself. She said they could have made their stars go dark and their worlds fall silent. They had the power to end the hegemony in an afternoon, and they chose not to. Why? The question came from a dozen voices at once, because they remembered what they used to be. Because they had spent 12,000 years becoming something else. Because they knew that true strength is not the ability to destroy, but the choice not to. Velik let that sink in before continuing. I saw the aftermath. I saw human medical teams treating wounded Krix warriors. I saw human engineers repairing enemy ships. I saw mercy given to those who had shown none. And I saw what it did to the Krix. The display changed again. It showed scenes from across the former hegemony. Krix warriors putting down their weapons, prisoners being released, conquered species being allowed to return home. Supreme Commander Vraxis surrendered 3 days after the battle, not because he was forced to, because he chose to. He told the Concord that he had seen something he could not explain, a power that could destroy everything, and chose mercy instead. He said it made him ashamed of what the Krix had become. Velik walked across the stage, his compound eyes catching the light. The hegemony is dismantling itself. Not quickly, not easily, but it is happening. Warriors who spent their lives believing that strength meant cruelty are asking questions they never asked before. A philosophy is spreading through their ranks. They call it the human way. But the humans have left, someone pointed out. They refused to join the Concord. They went back to the Shroud. They went somewhere, Velik corrected. Captain Chen said they were not ready to return. She said they were closer, but not there yet. She said to check on them in another 1,000 years. He smiled, or what passed for a smile among his species. But before they left, they did something extraordinary. They showed us that the worst among us can become the best. That monsters can become guardians. That any species, no matter how far they have fallen, can choose to rise. The display changed one final time. It showed a message that had been broadcast across the galaxy as the remembrance departed. "We answered your distress call," Captain Chen's voice said. But the real emergency was never the Krix. It was the belief that cruelty is strength and mercy is weakness. You know better now. When you are ready to believe it, we will come back. The recording ended. Velik stood in silence for a moment, letting the words echo through the hall. Humans did not save the galaxy by conquering it, he said finally. They saved it by example. By proving that change is possible. By showing us that evolution is not destiny. That any species can choose what it becomes. He looked out at the assembled representatives. Hundreds of species united in curiosity and hope. The question they left us is simple. If humanity, the most dangerous species ever recorded, could choose to become guardians instead of destroyers, what might we choose to become? The applause was thunderous, but Velik barely heard it. He was thinking about the remembrance somewhere in the unknown reaches of space. Following another distress call toward another crisis. He was thinking about a small human woman with ancient eyes who carried the weight of billions of deaths and had somehow found the strength to become something better. He was thinking about myths and monsters and the strange, beautiful truth that sometimes the greatest legends are the ones about redemption. Across the galaxy, things were changing on the former Krix homeworld. A young warrior named Threll stood before a memorial he had built himself. It was much smaller than the human wall of names, just a few hundred entries, but it was a start. These were the names of civilians he had killed during his years of service. He had started counting. He was not sure why, but it felt important. On Talvin Prime, refugees were returning home. Human technology had been shared with the Concord. Plans for atmospheric processors and agricultural systems that could restore the damaged world. The Talvin would rebuild. And they would remember who had avenged them without taking a single life. In the Concord Senate, new laws were being proposed. Protections for weaker species. Limits on military expansion. Requirements that all conflicts be subject to mediation before force could be used. The laws were controversial, but they were being discussed. That was something, and in 100 different places. On 100 different worlds, people were asking questions they had never asked before. Questions about strength and weaknesses. Questions about power and responsibility. Questions about what it truly meant to be civilized. The humans had planted a seed. Now it was growing far beyond the edge of known space. The remembrance approached its destination. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, looking at the structure that filled her view screen. It was ancient beyond imagining, construct of impossible geometry that seemed to exist in more dimensions than space should allow. Signals had been emanating from it for thousands of years, distress calls in languages that predated galactic civilization. What? Her first officer asked. We do not know yet. Chen's voice was calm as always. But someone built it. Someone was trapped inside. Someone called for help, has been calling for a very long time. Yes, and no one ever answered. Until now. The remembrance moved closer, its sensors probing the strange construct, its systems analyzing the ancient signals. Begin translation protocols, Chen ordered. Let them know we are here. Let them know help has arrived. She thought about the galaxy she had left behind. The Crix learning mercy. The Concord finding courage. The myth of human monsters slowly being replaced by the truth of human redemption. It was not enough. It would never be enough to balance the weight of those billions of names scrolling endlessly through the memorial halls of her ship. But it was a start, Captain, her communications officer said. We are receiving a response. They are asking who we are. Chen smiled. It was the same smile she had worn when she first emerged from the shroud, sad and ancient and full of determination. Tell them we are human, she said. Tell them we received their call for help. Tell them we have come a very long way. She paused, looking at the impossible structure before her, thinking about all the species who had suffered in silence because no one had bothered to listen. Tell them they are not alone anymore. The remembrance moved forward into the unknown, carrying the last survivors of a species that had once nearly destroyed everything and had spent 12,000 years learning how to save it instead. The myth of human monsters had ended. The truth of human guardians had just begun. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, the galaxy was learning a new word. Hope.